Visage is a psychological horror masterpiece that thrusts you into a nightmarish, ever-shifting house that constantly plays tricks on your mind. Right from the moment you step inside, there's an overwhelming sense of dread that lingers with every step you take. This game doesn't rely on cheap jump scares to frighten you. It builds tension slowly, letting the fear sink deep into your bones. The house itself feels alive, filled with dark corridors, unsettling noises, and haunting apparitions that seem to lurk just out of sight. As you piece together the fragmented stories of the house's former residents, the line between reality and nightmare becomes increasingly blurred. You're constantly on edge, wondering if what you're seeing is real or just another hallucination brought on by the overwhelming psychological horror. The deeper you venture, the more suffocating the atmosphere becomes, turning every moment into a nerve-wracking test of endurance. By the time you've unraveled the house's mysteries, Visage has already left an indelible mark on your psyche, making it one of the most terrifying psychological horror experiences you'll ever endure.
All right, I'm just finishing up something here.
In the Mortuary Assistant, the horrors you face are far more than just the dead bodies you're tasked with preparing. This game starts with what feels like a normal, if somewhat unsettling job, working in a mortuary. But as night falls and you begin your work embalming the bodies, strange and sinister events start to happen. The cold, sterile environment of the mortuary becomes the perfect backdrop for supernatural horrors, and you quickly realize that there's something terribly wrong. The game expertly uses its mundane setting to build tension. Everything feels off, as if something is watching you from the shadows. The supernatural encounters grow more frequent and more terrifying, as you struggle to determine whether it's all in your head or if something more sinister is at play. Each night in the mortuary feels like a battle against not just the spirits haunting the place, but your own unraveling sanity. As the hauntings escalate, the question of what's real and what's not becomes almost unbearable, making the Mortuary Assistant a deeply unsettling and unforgettable horror experience. Phasmophobia is a cooperative ghost hunting game that turns a seemingly fun paranormal investigation into a terrifying ordeal. What starts as a simple mission to gather evidence of supernatural activity quickly spirals into a fight for survival as the ghost you're hunting turns its attention on you. What makes Phasmophobia so effective is its use of audio. It listens to your voice through your microphone, and the more you talk, the more you provoke the ghost. This mechanic turns every session into a tense balancing act as you try to communicate with your team without angering the ghost too much. The game's environments, whether it's an abandoned school, a spooky farmhouse, or a suburban home, are filled with eerie details that make every shadow and sound a potential threat. The longer you stay in the haunted location, the more dangerous it becomes, until eventually the ghost goes into full hunting mode, turning your careful investigation into a desperate race to escape. The sheer unpredictability of the ghosts keeps you constantly on edge, making every round of Phasmophobia a thrilling and terrifying experience you can't forget. Outlast throws you into an abandoned psychiatric hospital, armed with nothing but a camcorder. This game is the very definition of helpless horror, as you're forced to navigate through dark, blood-soaked corridors while being hunted by deranged patients and unimaginable horrors. The atmosphere in Outlast is nothing short of oppressive. Every step feels like it might be your last, as you desperately try to avoid detection by the enemies lurking in the shadows. The camcorder, which you use to see in the dark, adds another layer of tension. You need it to survive, but its battery is limited, forcing you to conserve its use or risk being plunged into total darkness. The lack of weapons means you're constantly on the run, hiding in lockers or under beds, praying that whatever is chasing you doesn't find you. Each encounter feels like a near-death experience, with the game's brutal enemies and relentless pacing leaving little room for respite. By the time you reach the game's shocking conclusion, you're left both exhausted and exhilarated, having survived one of the most intense horror experiences in gaming. Though it was never fully released, PT remains one of the scariest and most influential horror games of all time. Developed as a teaser for a new Silent Hills game that never saw the light of day, PT is set in a never-ending loop of the same eerily quiet hallway. With each loop, subtle changes in the environment slowly build the tension until the game's full horror is unleashed. What makes PT so terrifying is its minimalism. There's very little sound, and the environment is incredibly limited. But the sheer repetition of walking through the same hallway, combined with the growing sense that something is very, very wrong, creates an atmosphere of pure dread. Every time you turn a corner, you brace yourself for the worst, and the game never lets up. The ghost that haunts the hallway is one of the most terrifying entities in any game, and the way she appears, seemingly out of nowhere, makes every second of PT an unbearable exercise in fear. Even though it's short, the psychological toll it takes on players is profound, and it's no wonder that PT is still considered one of the scariest games ever made. Amnesia. The Dark Descent redefined psychological horror when it was released, and its influence on the genre can still be felt today. You play as Daniel, a man who wakes up in a decrepit castle with no memory of how he got there. As you explore the dark, crumbling corridors of the castle, you begin to piece together a horrifying story, all while being hunted by unspeakable creatures. The game's sanity mechanic is one of its most brilliant features. Spend too long in the dark or witness too many terrifying sights, and Daniel's mental state begins to deteriorate. This manifests in terrifying hallucinations and an increased vulnerability to the horrors lurking in the shadows. The castle itself feels like a character, with its labyrinthine corridors, hidden passages, and chilling atmosphere making every step a challenge. With no weapons to defend yourself, your only options are to run or hide, which only adds to the terror. Every encounter with the game's monsters is a test of nerves, and by the time you reach the end, Amnesia has left a permanent mark on your psyche. Few horror games can match the psychological depth of Silent Hill 2. Unlike many horror games that rely on jump scares or grotesque monsters, Silent Hill 2 delves deep into the human psyche, using the town of Silent Hill as a manifestation of its protagonist's inner turmoil. You play as James Sunderland, a man searching for his deceased wife after receiving a letter from her beckoning him to the fog-covered town. What follows is a haunting exploration of guilt, grief, and madness, with every monster and environment reflecting James's fractured mind. The oppressive fog that blankets the town creates an atmosphere of constant unease, and the grotesque monsters, like the iconic Pyramid Head, are more than just physical threats. They're symbolic representations of James's emotional torment. The game's narrative is filled with disturbing twists and turns, making you question what's real and what's part of James's guilt-ridden hallucinations. The story stays with you long after the credits roll, solidifying Silent Hill 2 as not just a horror game, but a masterclass in psychological storytelling.
Guys, there's someone outside.
Until Dawn offers a unique horror experience, blending interactive storytelling with classic slasher movie tropes. You control a group of friends who are being stalked by a mysterious killer in a remote mountain cabin, and every choice you make influences who lives and who dies. The game's butterfly effect system ensures that even small decisions can have huge consequences, making every playthrough different. The tension comes from knowing that one wrong move could lead to a character's gruesome death, and the game keeps you constantly second-guessing your choices. The motion-captured performances are incredibly realistic, adding a layer of emotional depth to the characters that makes their fates even more impactful. The horror elements are expertly crafted, with a mix of supernatural scares, intense chase sequences, and brutal deaths. Until Dawn doesn't just play out like a horror movie, it feels like you're directing one, and the pressure to keep everyone alive adds a level of tension that few games can match. Alien Isolation captures the essence of Ridley Scott's original Alien film in a way no other game has managed. You play as Amanda Ripley, the daughter of Ellen Ripley, as she searches for answers about her mother's fate on a derelict space station. However, she quickly finds herself being hunted by a relentless xenomorph. What sets Alien Isolation apart is the xenomorph's AI. It's unpredictable, learning from your actions and adapting to your strategies. This creates an atmosphere of constant tension, as you never know when or where the alien will strike next. The game's use of stealth is masterful, as you're forced to hide in lockers, crawl through vents, and use limited resources to distract the alien. The station itself is a beautifully realized environment, perfectly capturing the retro-futuristic aesthetic of the Alien films. Every moment in Alien Isolation feels like a fight for survival, and by the time you make it off the station, you'll feel like you've lived through your own personal horror movie.
Fuck!
MADiSON is a modern psychological horror game that plays with your mind as much as it does with your nerves. You're armed with a Polaroid camera, which you use to uncover clues and solve puzzles in a haunted house filled with disturbing secrets. The game's narrative is deeply unsettling, as you slowly uncover the twisted story behind the haunting. The Polaroid camera is more than just a tool. It becomes your lifeline, revealing things that can't be seen with the naked eye. This mechanic keeps you constantly on edge, as every photo you take could reveal something terrifying. The game builds its horror through atmosphere and pacing, with each room in the house feeling more oppressive than the last. The sense of dread is relentless, and by the time you've uncovered the house's darkest secrets, MADiSON has already left a lasting impression on your mind. As a bonus game, we have Resident Evil 7, Biohazard, which is a return to form for the survival horror series, bringing back the slow-burning dread that made the original games so iconic. The shift to a first-person perspective makes the terror feel personal, trapping you in the dilapidated Baker family estate where every corner holds a new nightmare. From the moment you step inside, the suffocating atmosphere takes hold, and you're forced to navigate through disturbing encounters with the unhinged Baker family. The tension never lets up, and the game masterfully uses sound, lighting, and environmental storytelling to keep you on edge. The first-person view amplifies the horror, making you feel every heartbeat and every shadow lurking in the dark. It's a gripping, terrifying journey that sticks with you long after you've escaped the horrors within.
You're wasting your time!